My name is Susan Marsh. I'm 62 years old. For 15 years, my son Ethan told his wife, his friends, and eventually his own daughter that I walked out on him when he was a baby and never looked back. He built his entire identity around that story. The boy his mother abandoned. It explained, to everyone who ever asked, why we weren't close. It explained the careful distance he kept, the holiday cards that never came, the grandchildren I'd only ever seen in photos posted by relatives who still spoke to me. This Christmas, at a dinner table with 14 people around it, Ethan's 14-year-old daughter Emma looked at me with the kind of open curiosity only kids that age still have, and asked one question that unraveled 15 years of a story that was never, not for one single day, true. "Grandma Susan," she said, "why did you leave Dad when he was a baby?" The table went very quiet, and I had about 3 seconds to decide whether I was going to keep protecting a lie that wasn't even mine, or finally tell my son's daughter the truth he'd never let himself hear. 35 years ago, I was 27 years old, married to a man named Gary Marsh, and pregnant with my first and only child. The marriage was already unraveling by the time Ethan was born. Gary was controlling in ways I didn't fully have language for back then, the kind of controlling that isolates you slowly, cuts you off from friends and family one relationship at a time until you don't quite notice how alone you've become until it's already happened. When I finally found the strength to leave, 2 years after Ethan was born, Gary did something I still, decades later, find difficult to describe without my hands shaking. He fought for full custody, and he fought dirty. He hired a lawyer who painted me, in court documents I still have copies of, as unstable, neglectful, unfit. None of it true, all of it deeply believable to a judge in a system that, at the time, tended to side with whoever could afford the better lawyer and the more convincing narrative. I lost. Fully. Supervised visitation only, which Gary made functionally impossible by moving 3 states away within 6 months, citing a job opportunity that conveniently placed an ocean of logistics between me and my son. I wrote to Ethan every month for the first 8 years. Birthday gifts, every year, without fail. I have the receipts. I have the tracking numbers. I have, in a box in my closet, every single letter that came back to me unopened, marked, "Return to sender," in handwriting that was unmistakably Gary's. Ethan grew up believing I'd simply left. Gary never corrected that story. Why would he? It was easier than explaining his own choices. I never stopped trying, in the ways that were left available to me. When Ethan turned 18, I sent one more letter, a longer one this time, explaining everything, enclosing copies of the old court records. I never heard back. I don't know, to this day, if he ever received it or if Gary intercepted that one too. Over the following years, I watched from a careful, painful distance as Ethan built a life. Married a lovely woman named Marissa. Had Emma. I saw photos occasionally, shared by my sister, who'd maintained a thin thread of contact with Ethan over the years and would quietly pass along updates. I never pushed my way in. I made a decision, early on, that if Ethan ever wanted to know the truth, it needed to come from him choosing to ask, not from me forcing my version of events onto a son who'd spent his whole life believing something else. I thought that was the respectful thing to do. Looking back now, I wonder if it was actually just fear, dressed up as patience. 3 years ago, Gary passed away. I sent Ethan a card. He never responded, but he also, notably, didn't send it back unopened this time, the first sign, small as it was, that something might have shifted, even slightly, in how Gary's absence changed what Ethan was willing to consider. My sister eventually convinced Ethan's family to include me in this year's Christmas gathering, a cautious, tentative invitation, framed carefully as just to see how it feels. I said yes before she'd even finished the sentence. I brought a folder with me, just in case. I didn't plan to use it unless the moment called for it. I'd learned, over 35 years, not to force a door open before someone's ready to walk through it. Dinner was tense, but civil for the first hour. Ethan was polite but distant, the way you'd be with a coworker rather than a mother. And then Emma, halfway through dessert, asked her question, the kind of question a 14-year-old asks with no idea of the weight it's carrying, because nobody had ever explained the weight to her. "Grandma Susan, Why did you leave Dad when he was a baby? I looked at Ethan first. He looked away, not angry, just braced. The way you brace for a story you've told yourself so many times it's become armor. I chose honesty. Gently but fully. I didn't leave your father, Emma, I said. I lost a custody battle when he was 2, to a man who made sure I could never really find my way back to him. I wrote him letters every month for 8 years. I sent him gifts every birthday. Almost none of it ever reached him. The table had gone completely silent. Ethan's face had shifted from braced to something closer to disbelief. That's not what happened, he said, quiet, more to himself than to me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I'd brought, hoping I wouldn't need it, glad, in that moment, that I had. I set it on the table between us. Court records. Tracking receipts for gifts sent across 8 consecutive years. And at the bottom, still sealed, never opened, 6 of the birthday cards I'd mailed him as a child, returned in Gary's handwriting. Ethan didn't say anything for a long moment. He picked up one of the sealed envelopes, his own name on the front, written by me in my handwriting from 26 years ago, and just held it, turning it over slowly, like he was trying to understand an object from a language he didn't quite speak. He told me you didn't want me, Ethan finally said. He told me that so many times I stopped questioning it. I built my whole life around that story. I told Marissa that. I told Emma that. I know, I said. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty about the years you believed him. You were a child. You believed the only parent who was actually present. That's not a flaw in you. That was survival. He opened one of the letters, right there at the table, hands slightly unsteady. I watched my grown son read words I'd written to a 6-year-old version of him. Words about a school play I'd heard he was in, words wishing him a happy birthday, words telling him I loved him and thought about him every single day, for the very first time, at 38 years old, sitting at a Christmas table with his own daughter watching. His anger, when it finally surfaced, wasn't directed at me. It was directed at the years. At everything he'd lost that could never actually be returned to him, no matter how honest this dinner turned out to be. We didn't fix 15 years of distance in one Christmas dinner. That's not how any of this works, and I want to be honest with you about that instead of pretending there was some tidy, movie-perfect ending. What we did start was something real. Ethan and I have been reading through those old letters together, one at a time, over the past few weeks. Slowly. Some visits are quiet. Some are hard. A few of them, we've both cried, which is more honest connection than we managed in the previous 15 years combined. Emma, for her part, has taken to calling me every Sunday. I don't think she fully understands yet how much that means to me. Someday, maybe she will. If there's one thing I want you to sit with tonight, it's this. The truth doesn't erase the years it comes too late to save. But it's the only thing that can stop those years from continuing to steal the ones still ahead of you. If you've been holding on to a truth, waiting for someone else to be ready to hear it, you get to decide, too, when waiting has gone on long enough. Tell me in the comments, has a lie in your family ever taken roots so deep that it became someone's whole identity? I want to hear your story, and I read every single comment.